King Solomon writes in the Bible, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path." That's in the book of Proverbs. Now, most of the time, of course, we are unaware of how God is working out his will for our lives and directing our paths. But there are times and there are situations when we do become conscious of his presence and of his voice, pointing us in this direction or that, telling us to say this or to say that. That voice, of course, is not usually an audible one. It is what a friend of mine calls the divine nudge. It's if God's saying, as he nudges us with his elbow, "Look, Mosey, this is what I want you to do." There is a verse in Isaiah chapter 30, verse 21 says, "Your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it, whenever you turn to the right hand or whenever you turn to the left." Now, the following are just three of the many, many examples when God has given me that divine nudge, and amazing things have happened which have shown that God knows there is a God, and he knows what is going to happen. He knows the future. He knows yours. He knows mine. The first one I want to share with you is I was about 15 or 16 years of age, I think 15. I used to go, we lived on the outskirts of the city, and I used to have to go into the town on a Sunday to the church, which was in the city centre. And I often went on my bike, but that night, this Sunday night, it was pouring with rain. So I went to the bus stop to get the bus. Sundays, there were buses every half an hour into the city. And from our house, there were two buses went by number 18 and the number 18A. And they went so far, and then they divided and went by two different routes into the city centre, meeting up in the city centre bus station. I stood at the bus stop, and there was no cover. It was just a pole. It wasn't a covered bus stop, waiting for the first bus to come. Well, it didn't. It was late. And I thought, oh dear, I'm getting soaked, and I'm going to be late for church. Eventually it came. I saw the bus coming down the hill. But as it was coming, I heard a voice. No, not with my ears. It was the divine nudge. But it was very clear. It was almost as if the voice was saying, "Don't get on this bus." It was a number 18. Don't get on this bus. I thought, I'm a bit like Jonah was. Jonah used to argue with God a bit. And I said, God almost said, "Lord, don't be silly." I said, "What if I don't get this bus? I'm going to be late for church and I'm getting soaking wet. Don't get on this bus." So as it came, at the last minute, I stepped back and the bus went by and didn't stop. I felt that I had to listen to that voice. Of course, then there was another voice straight away. "Idiot, why didn't you get on the bus? Look at it, you're getting soaked and you'll get to church halfway through the service." Well, less than 5 minutes, another bus came, and it was the 18A. I gladly got on the bus. Now, I never went upstairs, not very often anyway, because it smelled of smoke upstairs. It's where smoking was allowed upstairs. But I felt very impelled to get on and go up the stairs. So I went up the stairs, and there were a handful of people, a half a dozen people sitting scattered about this bus. And I went up and sat at the right-hand side by the window. Bus went on 3 or 4 stops, and then it deviated to the 18A route. Stopped, and at the first bus stop there, a girl got on and came up the stairs. She was about my age, 15-ish, and she got on and came up and why? But why she did, I don't know. She came and she sat next to me. There were lots of empty seats, pairs of empty seats, but she came and sat next to me. And I noticed almost immediately that she was crying. Now, I was very embarrassed I've got this very, very pretty girl sitting next to me, crying her eyes out, and I was a bit sort of very girl conscious at that time. And I didn't want to look at her. And I was looking at her image in the dark window because it was winter time and night time, looking in the window, and I saw the tears running down her face. Eventually I plucked up courage and I said to her, "What's the matter?" She said, "I don't know." She says, "My dad has had a big row with me and I don't like it. He doesn't want me to go dancing tonight to the Locarno ballroom." He didn't like her going to the Locarno ballroom. I said, "Oh dear, oh dear." So I said, "Well, what are you going to do?" She said, I don't know. She said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm going to church." And then I really plucked up courage. I said, "Why don't you come with me?" And she did. And she came with me. And that night, God spoke to her, touched her heart. She gave her heart and life to Jesus Christ. She believed the gospel. And she became one of the finest children's workers I've ever known in my whole life. There must be a God. He knew about it. It was the right route. It was the right bus and the right seat. And God knew what he was doing. That could never have happened without God in hand, having it in hand. And then there was another time when I think I might have heard even an audible voice. I was sitting in our denomination's annual conference. There were about, I think, 300 people there, 3 or 4 or maybe more hundred. Yes, it was more, 400 people there. And as I was sitting there, it was pretty boring. And they were talking about finances. People were giving financial reports. And I heard this voice saying the name of a country in Asia again and again. And it repeated twice the name of this country. It was a dangerous Muslim country where it wasn't easy for the church at that time, and nor is now. And it wouldn't go away. This voice kept repeating this name. And I said to my friend sitting next to me, "Did you hear that?" And he said, "Oh, go hear what?" He said, "Go back to sleep." But I didn't. I went at the end of the meeting to a man that I knew was the director for missions in that part of the world, missions and humanitarian projects. And I said to him, "Ray, what's the deal with this country?" He looked at me, put his hand in his inside pocket of his jacket, took out a letter. He said, and he read the letter to me. He said, "I've had this letter for 6 weeks and I've wondered what to do with it." And the letter said, would he send someone to preach at a youth camp, a week's youth camp, their very first one, and do 3 one-week missions in 3 of the churches. He said, "Well, I've been asking the Lord to send someone to me. I didn't know who to ask. But I asked God to send someone to me to ask me about this country." So he said, "Obviously it's you." So I went. I thought it was right. And it was an amazing, amazing time. It was a difficult time, but it was an amazing time. And God's did wonderful, wonderful things at that time. One final one. Again, eventually they asked me to be the co-director for this work in Asia. I was pastoring a church in England. It wasn't a paid position being the director. You had to raise your own finances for travel. And I used to spend 6 weeks of the year traveling in Asia every year, visiting our workers and on various projects and lecturing in Bible colleges, preaching in churches there. And it was a good time for a good number of years. And I remember one time I'd been 4 weeks right throughout Asia, many, many different countries, from Pakistan right through to the Philippines, Taiwan, Thailand, Malaysia, all sorts of places. And I was in Singapore, and it was the end of my trip. I was so tired. I was looking forward to getting home. And I was staying with a friend in Singapore, and the man came who was the secretary for the executive council of the churches, our churches in Singapore. And he said, "John, we're having our annual conference up near Kuala Lumpur in the Highlands there at a hotel. Would you like to come and join us in our conference? We'd love to have you there. It's a 3-day conference." I said, "Well, no thanks, but because I'm looking forward to getting home. And the day after tomorrow, I'm just having a rest here for 1 day. And then the day after tomorrow, I'm flying from Singapore to Kuala Lumpur, getting a flight from Kuala Lumpur back to England." So I said, "No, thank you." But that night, God woke me up and said, "You should be going to Singapore, to this conference." And it would not go out of my mind. I didn't hear a voice. It was the divine nudge. So in the morning, I got up. I got my friend to take me to the airport. I went to the desk. The lady at the desk said, "I beg your pardon, I'm sorry, but we have no empty seats. Every seat of the 1-hour flight to Kuala Lumpur is booked. And I've got 3 people here waiting for tickets, waiting for cancellations. So sorry." Well, I was so convinced that this was what I'd got to do. I went and got myself a cup of coffee, and then I came back. And she said, "Oh, do you still want a ticket to Kuala Lumpur?" I said, "Yes, please." She said, "Well, I've got one for you." She said, "One of the 3 has just left. He's gone home." And I suddenly had one cancellation. Someone phoned that they can't come. And the other 2 people who are waiting are a married couple. So they need 2 tickets. So the 1 ticket, it's yours if you want it. So I got on the plane. I got to Kuala Lumpur. I got a taxi for the 1.5-hour drive. It used to be that much then. Now there's a highway goes part of the way. It's much less. But it was an 1.5-hour taxi drive up into the Jinting Highlands. On the way up on the taxi, I felt the nudge again. "John, you're going to be preaching in this conference." I thought, don't be crazy. But it wouldn't go away. So I took out my notebook and started praying and prayerfully making notes. I got to the other end, to the hotel. It was a holiday area up in the hills. And I was met by my friend from the churches there. And he said, "Oh, John, nice to see you. Glad you've come. That really is lovely. We're just going in for dinner. And after dinner, it's the first of the opening meeting for our conference." So I joined them at their table for dinner. We had a lovely time. At the end of the meal, the chairman of the conference came over to me and he said, "John," he said, "we've got a problem." He said, "The main speaker for our conference has just phoned and said that he's missed his flight in some other place of part of the Far East. He said, and he's missed his flight and he can't get here until tomorrow. We don't know what to do, but would you speak for us tonight in the opening meeting? I said yes. And so we went into the meeting after the dinner, sat on the front row with these leading brethren. And I thought, I wonder what the conference theme is. And as I looked up, there was a banner across the platform, Walking in the Spirit. And I looked down at my pencil-written notes on my notepad, Walking in the Spirit. It was just right. I preached what I'd got there. It was a very simple message, but at the end of it, two of the men on the front row, executive brethren, were on their faces in tears, and there was a great move amongst the others as well. Someone explained to me afterwards, my friend explained to me later, that there had been some dispute about some things over the previous few days and weeks, and now it was all sorted. It was all right. God had dealt with it. I got another taxi the next morning back down into Kuala Lumpur and got my flight home. I was glad to be home. But you know, that couldn't have happened without a God, without someone who knows what he's doing. It's an amazing thing. It is a proof to me that what the gospel says is true. What the Bible says about the need to hear God speak to us and to respond to his loving call is important. On the 5th morning after our daughter's death, I want to tell you something. Oh yes, our daughter died. That was quite a thing that has never left us. We will never forget that Christmas. Our daughter she was 19 and her name was Helga, and she had done well at school, got a place to study music at a university, and she played the violin and the piano and sang beautifully. She wanted to be a professional singer. She got a place to study music at Lancaster University, but she took a year out and went to the United States, where for a few months, and she was singing in a Christmas production with the New Jersey Choral Arts Society. And that evening, when it all happened, the phone rang, 21st of December, 1988. A lady from our church who had had 7 boys, 7 sons, and she loved Helga as the daughter that she had always wanted.